My name is Callum Reeve. I was 23 when the last string between me and my family finally snapped. It wasn't dramatic at first, just my sister standing in the kitchen, arms folded like she owned the place. "Hand me your credit card," she said, casual as if she were asking for salt. Her tone wasn't a request, it was an order dressed in entitlement. I laughed, a dry sound that surprised even me. "No." Her eyes sharpened like glass catching light. She had always lived off someone. First Dad, then her boyfriends, then me whenever I was foolish enough to leave my wallet on the counter. That day though, something in me tilted. Instead of arguing, I pulled out my phone. A ticket popped up on my screen. One way, no return, destination set to a country I'd only dreamed about. My thumb hesitated for half a breath before pressing confirm. By the time she realized I wasn't bluffing, my bag was already half-packed. 2 hours later at the airport my phone buzzed. "Dad, sign off on your sister's mortgage," the message read, "or don't bother coming back." It should have hurt. Maybe it did in the space behind my ribs, but adrenaline drowned it. 4 years, I had been their quiet reserve fund. The dependable son who never complained when they siphoned my savings into her whims. Tuition. Cars. Designer handbags. Now a mortgage. I stared at the message until the words blurred, then opened my banking app. The screen glowed soft blue in the dim departure lounge. One by one, I closed every joint account, every secondary card, every thread of access they had to me. Each confirm felt like slicing rope from an anchor. By midnight, the accounts were gone. My balance was mine. And my phone lit up, buzz after buzz, her name flashing across the screen like a siren. 57 missed calls stacked in neat red numbers, an orchestra of rage that would never be answered. I slipped the phone into airplane mode, the hum of engines swelling around me. For the first time in years, silence belonged to me. But silence, I would learn, does not stay quiet for long. The plane's cabin lights dimmed, casting everyone in a faint amber haze. I sat pressed against the window, staring at the runway lights flickering like Morse code. The truth was, I hadn't told anyone where I was going, not even the friends who used to half-joke that I'd never escape my family's leash. I thought about my sister. Her voice, sharp as a knife, would be echoing through the house right now. She'd be cursing me, kicking furniture, demanding Dad fix it. And Dad, God, I could see his jaw tightening, his fingers already typing messages that turned my absence into betrayal. For a brief second, guilt tried to crawl back into me. But then I remembered the years of being their safe bet. Whenever my sister overdrew her accounts, they reached for me. Whenever Dad needed someone to co-sign a bad deal, my name was inked. I wasn't a son, I was a bank. The engines roared and the plane lifted, my stomach dropping with it. In that fall, I felt something snap free. 3 hours later, somewhere over the Atlantic, I switched my phone off airplane mode just to check. Messages spilled in like a floodgate had burst. "Dad, ungrateful. Dad, you'll regret this. Sister, you ruined my life. Sister, if I lose the house, it's your fault. Sister, answer me." 57 calls had grown into 81. Each notification was another nail sealing the coffin of whatever family we'd been pretending to be. I didn't reply. Instead, I drafted a message to myself, a kind of journal entry. This is not running away. This is reclaiming. When the plane landed, I stepped into a city where nobody knew my name, nobody cared about my last name's weight. The air was damp with sea salt, the streets humming with languages I couldn't yet decipher. I breathed it all in like oxygen. That night, I checked my bank again. Every account was mine alone. The digits glowed steady, untouched. For the first time, my future wasn't shackled to her spending habits or his commands. But my family wasn't going to let me vanish quietly. I could feel it like thunder crawling under the horizon. My new city woke with a kind of noise I had never known before, vendors shouting in a language I barely grasped, buses groaning at corners, the sea wind slipping through alleyways like it was alive. I rented a single room above a bakery, the smell of fresh bread seeped into my sheets each dawn. It wasn't luxury, but it was mine. Work came quickly, faster than I expected. A startup cafe needed an English-speaking barista who could smile through mistakes. I was clumsy at first, burned milk, broken cups, but the regulars were kind, curious about the foreigner with the soft accent. My hands learned new rhythms, my pockets filled with small wages. Each coin meant I belonged here a little more. But the calls didn't stop. Even with international roaming blocked, they found ways. Emails, unknown numbers, even old friends forwarding me screenshots of my sister's posts. She was furious online, painting me as the villain who had abandoned family for selfish dreams. Strangers rallied behind her in comments. Poor girl. What kind of brother does that? I didn't answer. I let the silence stretch, a thread tightening around all of us. One evening, while closing the cafe, I scrolled through the bank app again. The account still stood closed. My sister's name wasn't tied to mine anymore. Relief, sharp and fleeting, washed over me, until a new email appeared. From Dad. Subject, final chance. The words hit harder than I wanted them to. Inside, the message was short: sign for the mortgage, Callum. Family means sacrifice. If you refuse again, don't come back. We'll erase you. I stared at the glow of the screen, my reflection faint against it. Erase me. As if I were an entry in his ledger, something to be crossed out. My thumb hovered, not over reply but over delete. And I pressed it. The next morning, a stranger slipped into the cafe. He didn't order coffee. He placed a folded letter on the counter and said in practiced English, "From your father." And just like that, distance collapsed. They had found me. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. My hands trembled slightly as I carried it into the back room of the cafe. I didn't open it right away. I stared at it as though the weight alone could tell me what waited inside. Finally, I tore the seal. The handwriting was unmistakable. My father's pen strokes always carried the arrogance of a man who believed his words were law. You are still our blood. That cannot change. Your sister's mortgage must be signed. We gave you everything and you repay us with betrayal? If you refuse, then you are no son of mine. Consider this your last warning. At the bottom, his signature sprawled wide, blotched with ink. I sat there for a long time, the hum of the cafe's refrigerator filling the silence. For years, those words, no son of mine, had been the fear that held me in place. Now, reading them, I felt something stranger than pain. I felt release. I folded the letter once, twice, until it was small enough to toss into the bin. But I didn't throw it away. Instead, I slipped it back into my pocket. A reminder. A scar pressed in ink. That night, lying in my rented room with the smell of bread still clinging to the air, I dreamed of childhood. I saw myself at 10 years old, winning a small school award. I had rushed home with the certificate, expecting pride. My sister had rolled her eyes and Dad had said, "That's nothing compared to what she'll achieve." Even then, I was the shadow. The fallback. The wallet in waiting. The next morning, my phone buzzed again, this time not with calls but with a bank alert. Unauthorized login attempt. Multiple from my hometown. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. They were trying to break into what was left. I changed passwords, added new locks of digits and codes. But I knew it wouldn't end here. For the first time, I realized my silence was no longer just defense. It was a weapon. And they were starting to realize how sharp it could cut. I started carrying the letter in my pocket everywhere, like a warning label stitched to my life. It reminded me what I was walking away from, what I could never return to. But the world outside my family's grasp was growing. At the cafe, I was promoted to shift supervisor. The owner, an older man with a limp, told me, "You work like you've lost something important. People who've lost make the best leaders." I didn't correct him. He was right. I had lost parents, a sister, a home. And yet, with each cup of coffee I poured, each laugh with a regular customer, I felt like I was gaining something bigger. Still, their presence stalked me. One night, after closing, I received a message from an unknown number. Attached was a photo, the front of my new apartment. The caption read, "We can always find you, Callum." My throat went dry. The street outside was empty, silent but suddenly menacing. I double-locked the door, sat in the corner, and held my breath as though the walls could hear me. The next morning, I showed the photo to the cafe owner. He raised his eyebrows but said nothing, just handed me a second set of keys. "For the back entrance," he said. "In case you ever need to disappear fast." That was when I knew my family's obsession wasn't about money anymore, it was about control. They couldn't accept that I had stepped out of their story. I drafted a letter of my own, written not in anger but in clarity. I am not your credit line. I am not your safety net. I am not your son if son only means servant. I didn't send it. Not yet. But it sat on my desk, waiting. And as if the universe wanted to test me, that same evening an email arrived. From my sister. Subject line, "You'll regret this." Attached was a document, my name forged on the mortgage I'd refused to sign. The forged mortgage document glared up at me from the screen, my name scrawled across it in a perfect imitation of my signature. For a moment, my chest hollowed, fear, disbelief, the gut punch of betrayal so raw I could almost taste it. I had expected anger from my sister. I had expected begging, threats, maybe even manipulation. But forgery? That was a step into a new battlefield. I printed the document at the cafe's back office, the machine coughing out the paper with an almost sinister rhythm. I stared at it under the yellow bulb, tracing the curves of letters I didn't write. It was uncanny. They knew my hand well enough to mimic it, and then something inside me settled. If they wanted war, I would not meet them with silence alone. Silence had been my shield, but evidence could be my sword. I walked to a lawyer's office the next day, clutching the forged document like a poisoned relic. The receptionist raised her brows when I explained. Soon enough, I was sitting across from a man with tired eyes and a sharper mind. He studied the page, then looked at me. "This," he said quietly, "is a crime. Bank fraud. Identity theft. If they filed this officially, they could face prison." The word hung heavy in the room. Prison. Part of me recoiled. Could I really push it that far? They were still my family. But then another part, the part that remembered the years of drained accounts, the humiliations, the constant demands, rose up like fire. I left his office with a copy of the forged file secured, instructions to gather more evidence if they pressed forward. That night another email arrived. This time from Dad. "Think carefully, Callum. You'll destroy us all if you go through with this. Do you really want that on your conscience?" His words were meant to chain me. Instead they snapped the last tie. Because for the first time I realized, what they feared most wasn't losing money. It was losing me. The storm finally broke 2 weeks later. I was sweeping the cafe floor when a customer left the morning newspaper behind. On the front page, my sister's name. My father's too. Headline bold as a scar. "Local family investigated for forgery and mortgage fraud." My knees nearly buckled. I skimmed the article, my heart hammering. The bank had flagged inconsistencies, alerted authorities. My forged signature had been their undoing. The investigation spread fast, linking years of suspicious withdrawals and irregular cosigns. My silence hadn't just cut them off, it had exposed them. By noon, customers whispered about the story, not knowing the quiet barista behind the counter was the missing piece. I forced a smile, poured another cappuccino while inside, something deep and wounded exhaled. That evening I received another letter, this time not delivered by strangers but by post. It was from my father, written in a trembling hand. "Callum, your sister has been arrested. She says you set her up. I know you didn't, but the truth doesn't matter now. The name Reeve is ruined. If you cared at all, you'd come back and stand by us. Blood is blood." I held the letter over my small desk lamp, the paper glowing orange like it might catch fire. Blood is blood. That phrase had been his shield forever, an excuse for every debt shoved onto me, every sacrifice demanded. But blood, I realized, is also where poison runs. News traveled quickly after that. My sister crying in court, my father's face hard and gray behind her. Friends from back home sent me screenshots, links, photos. Some relatives texted me quietly, "You did the right thing. We knew something was wrong." Others spat venom, calling me traitor, coward. I answered none of them. Instead, I stood on my balcony, the city below humming with life that had nothing to do with me, nothing to do with them. For the first time, I wasn't tangled in their demands or their ruin. But peace wasn't victory, not yet. Something still ached unfinished, like a string pulled too tight. I knew what I had to do. The courthouse was colder than I expected. Pale walls, polished floors, the kind of silence that seemed to swallow sound whole. I sat in the back row, my cap pulled low, watching as the people who once claimed to own me took their seats at the defense table. My sister's eyes scanned the room like a cornered animal. She looked smaller, fragile in a way I'd never seen. My father, though, wore his mask of steel, the same look he had when he told me to sign or don't come back. But when his gaze brushed over the judge, the mask cracked. Evidence piled like bricks. The forged mortgage. Bank records tracing withdrawals from accounts in my name. The lawyer I'd visited weeks earlier stood steady, presenting every detail. My name surfaced again and again, but never as the villain. For once, the truth bent toward me. When the judge spoke, his words landed heavy. Fines, probation for my sister, possible prison if restitution wasn't met. My father wasn't charged formally, but his reputation bled out in whispers across the gallery. The Reeve name was ruined. I slipped out before anyone could notice me. Outside, the air tasted sharper, freer. I didn't feel triumph. No victory fanfare played. Just quiet. That evening, I walked to the shoreline, shoes sinking into wet sand as waves breathed in and out. I pulled out the final letter I'd written but never sent, the one that began, "I am not your credit line." I tore it once, twice, letting the scraps scatter into the tide. Because I didn't need them to read it anymore. They already knew. Back in my small room above the bakery, I set one plate on the table, poured myself a modest dinner, and ate slowly. Alone, yes, but not lonely. My phone, face down, vibrated with another call. I didn't flip it over. Silence stretched, deep and whole, not a weapon this time, but peace. For years they had mistaken my quiet for weakness. But in the end, it was my silence that unmade them. And that was enough.